24 and 60 should have been impossible. But when their hands touched across that table, electricity didn't care about numbers. Gavino had forgotten what it felt like to want someone so desperately it hurt to breathe. And Emily had never known what it meant to be worshipped. One dinner and they both knew this wasn't just attraction. This was destiny waking up. Emily stood in the doorway, rain dripping from her coat, her chest heaving from running 6 blocks in the storm. Her best friend Maya and her boyfriend Derek were somewhere behind her in that crowded bar, probably still tangled together, probably not even noticing she had left. The image was burned into her mind. Walking into that private room to surprise Derek for his birthday, only to find him kissing Maya, her supposed best friend since college, their hands all over each other like Emily didn't exist. The Italian restaurant was warm, filled with the scent of garlic and fresh bread and tomatoes simmering in olive oil. She stumbled inside, her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed in public. Her mother had taught her better than that. You don't let people see you break even when you are shattered inside. "Miss, do you have a reservation?" the hostess asked gently, her eyes full of sympathy that made Emily want to scream. Emily shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She just needed somewhere to sit, somewhere quiet, somewhere she could disappear and pretend the last hour hadn't happened. Somewhere she could figure out how her entire life had fallen apart in the space of a heartbeat. "Come," a deep voice said from behind her. The accent was thick and unmistakably Italian. "Sit at my table." She turned and found him, a man who looked like he had stepped out of a different era entirely. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, and powerful despite his age. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. His hair was mostly dark with distinguished gray at the temples. His beard was more salt than pepper, carefully trimmed and elegant, but it was his eyes that held her frozen. Dark brown, almost black, steady and knowing like he could see straight through to her broken heart. He was older, much older than her 24 years. But he didn't look old in the way she expected. He looked timeless, like a statue in a museum that had witnessed centuries and remained standing. "I don't," Emily started, her voice cracking. "You're soaked, you're upset, and this restaurant is full." His accent wrapped around each word like silk, making even simple statements sound profound. "I'm dining alone. You need a seat. Simple solution." Something about his calm certainty, the way he stated facts without judgment or pity, made her nod. He gestured to the hostess with a small motion of his hand, barely more than a finger lift, and the woman immediately straightened, leading them to a corner booth away from the crowded dining room. The booth was private, tucked into an alcove with soft lighting and a view of the rain-soaked street outside. Emily slid in, grateful for the leather seat that seemed to hold her together when she felt like falling apart. Gavino, though she didn't know his name yet, took the seat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. He didn't crowd her space, didn't lean forward with fake concern. He just sat there, solid and present like a mountain that had no intention of moving. "I'm Gavino," he said, pouring her a glass of water from the pitcher on the table with steady hands. "Gino Dante." The name sounded important somehow, though Emily couldn't place why. "Emily Hayes," she whispered, accepting the glass with trembling hands. The water was cold and clean, and she drank half of it in one gulp, suddenly realizing how thirsty running through the rain had made her. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't pry or probe or offer empty platitudes. He simply signaled the waiter, another small gesture that brought immediate attention, and ordered soup, bread, and tea without consulting her. When she opened her mouth to protest, he raised one hand gently. "You look like you've had a difficult evening. Food first, words after, if you wish." His dark eyes held hers. "Trust me on this. The body needs nourishment before the heart can begin to heal." The soup arrived within minutes. A rich minestrone thick with vegetables and beans, smelling like comfort itself, like someone's grandmother had been cooking it all day with love. Fresh bread came with it, still warm from the oven with real butter and olive oil for dipping. The tea was chamomile, soothing and gentle. Emily hadn't realized how cold she was until the first spoonful of soup warmed her from the inside out. She ate slowly at first, then faster, her body remembering it needed fuel, even when her heart was breaking. Gavino ate his own meal in silence, occasionally glancing at her, but never staring, never making her feel watched or judged, just present, solid, there. My boyfriend cheated on me, Emily finally said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. With my best friend. I walked in on them tonight. It was his birthday party, and I went to surprise him, and instead, I found them. She couldn't finish the sentence. Gavino's expression didn't change dramatically, but something dark flickered in his eyes, something cold and dangerous that was there and gone in an instant. Then he's a fool. You don't even know me. I know you walk through a storm rather than stay in a room with betrayal. I know you carry yourself with dignity even when your heart is breaking. I know you came into a restaurant alone and soaking wet, but you didn't make a scene or demand attention. He set down his spoon deliberately. I know you're stronger than you think you are. That's enough to know he's a fool. Emily's throat tightened with emotion that wasn't quite tears, but wasn't quite relief either. She had expected pity or awkward comfort, or someone telling her it would all be okay. Instead, this stranger offered her something more valuable. Respect, recognition, the acknowledgement that her strength mattered even when she felt weak. Why did you invite me to sit? She asked, studying his face. There were lines around his eyes and mouth, laugh lines mixed with deeper grooves that spoke of harder emotions. His hands were large and strong, with a few small scars across the knuckles. Working hands, despite the expensive suit. Gavino considered the question carefully, like he considered everything. Because you reminded me of someone I once knew. Someone who needed kindness when the world had been cruel. He paused, his gaze distant for a moment. And because I could not watch you stand in the rain any longer. Some things are wrong to witness without action. They finished the meal in comfortable silence. Emily noticed that Gavino ate slowly, deliberately, savoring each bite like food was something to be respected. She noticed he ordered only vegetarian dishes, no meat in his soup, no chicken stock, nothing with animal products. She noticed the way the staff treated him with deference that bordered on fear, though he was nothing but polite to them. When the check came, Gavino paid before Emily could even reach for her purse. The waiter practically bowed when taking his card. Let me at least pay for half. No, Gavino said firmly but gently. Tonight you accept kindness. Tomorrow you can argue with me if we meet again. If we meet again. The words hung between them like a promise neither had made but both felt. Something was happening here. Something Emily didn't understand but couldn't deny. This stranger had shown her more care in an hour than Derek had in 2 years of dating. Gavino stood and offered his hand. Come, I'll make sure you get home safely. I have a car, Emily said, standing as well. Her legs felt steadier now, her mind clearer. You're in no state to drive. My driver will take you. That's really not necessary, Emily. The way he said her name stopped her cold. It wasn't commanding or harsh. It was careful, like he was tasting something precious, rolling the syllables around in his mouth to see how they felt. Please allow me this. Let me help you. It costs you nothing but a few moments of time. She nodded, too exhausted to fight, too touched by his genuine concern to refuse. Something about Gavino made her feel safe in a way she had forgotten was possible. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the curb. A Mercedes with tinted windows and leather seats. The driver, a middle-aged man in a dark suit, opened the door immediately when Gavino approached. He moved with military precision, standing at attention until Gavino gave him a small nod. Emily slid inside the warm interior, sinking into seats that felt like butter. Gavino leaned down to speak through the window, one hand resting on the roof of the car. Emily Hayes, he said softly, his voice barely audible over the rain. The world is full of fools who don't recognize treasure when they hold it. You deserve better than what you received tonight. Remember that. Promise me you'll remember. Before she could respond, before she could thank him or ask for his number, or do any of the things her spinning mind was suggesting, he stepped back. The car pulled away into the rain, and Emily watched through the rear window as Gavino stood there, hands in his pockets, getting soaked as he watched her leave. Something in her chest cracked open, not breaking but expanding, making room for feelings she didn't have names for yet. The next morning, Emily woke with swollen eyes and a heart that felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. Her phone was filled with texts from Derek, 37 of them, each more desperate than the last. Apologies and excuses and promises that it meant nothing, that Maya had kissed him, that he'd been drunk, that he loved Emily, only Emily, always Emily, nothing from Maya, not one word, just silence from the friend she had known since they were 18, the friend who had been her maid of honor in her imagined future wedding, the friend she had trusted with everything. Emily blocked both numbers without reading the rest of the messages. She deleted their photos from her phone, their contact information, every trace she could erase in 5 minutes. Then she dragged herself to work, moving through her apartment like a ghost. She worked at a small art gallery downtown called the Meridian, a quiet job she loved because it let her disappear into beauty when life became too loud. The gallery specialized in contemporary artists, mostly local, and Emily spent her days cataloging pieces, arranging exhibitions, and talking to collectors about the emotional resonance of color and form. It was perfect for someone who had always wanted to be an artist herself, but never quite had the courage to try. Today, she needed that escape more than ever. Needed to lose herself in other people's visions instead of drowning in her own pain. But when she arrived at work, there was a delivery waiting at the front desk. A massive bouquet of white roses, easily 3 dozen, arranged in a crystal vase that caught the morning light like diamonds. The gallery assistant, Emma, was staring at them with wide eyes. "These just arrived for you," Emma said, her voice hushed with awe. "Emily, who did you save in a past life?" Emily approached the flowers like they might bite, her heart pounding. There was a card tucked among the blooms, heavy cream paper with elegant handwriting in black ink. Treasure doesn't lose value because someone failed to appreciate it. L.D. Gavino, a man she had met once for barely an hour, who somehow understood exactly what she needed to hear. Not empty reassurances that everything would be okay, not platitudes about fish in the sea or time healing wounds, just a simple statement of fact. She had value regardless of Derek's inability to see it. Emily pressed the card to her chest, feeling something dangerous blooming in her heart. Something that felt like hope, which was terrifying because hope could be crushed, and she wasn't sure she could survive another crushing. She put the flowers on her desk where she could see them all day. Emma kept circling back, asking questions Emily couldn't answer. Who was LD? How did they meet? Was he single? Was Emily okay? The answers felt too complicated, too new, too fragile to speak aloud. Throughout the day, Emily tried to focus on work. She had an exhibition to prepare, a series by a young American woman artist who painted portraits of everyday heroes, regular people doing extraordinary things in their communities. The paintings were powerful, full of dignity and strength, and Emily lost herself in arranging them on the gallery walls, finding the perfect flow and balance. But her mind kept drifting back to Gavino, to his steady presence, to the way he had offered help without making her feel weak, to the way he had looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth protecting, worth caring about. Later that evening, as Emily locked up the gallery, she found him standing across the street, just standing there, leaning against a lamppost like he had all the time in the world, hands in his pockets, watching her with that same intense focus from the night before. Her heart did something strange in her chest, a flutter and a squeeze all at once. She looked both ways and crossed the street toward him, her bag clutched in her hands. "Are you following me?" she asked, trying to sound stern, but failing because her voice came out breathless. Gavino's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Checking on you. There's a difference. How did you even find me?" "You mentioned last night that you worked at a gallery. There are only 3 in this neighborhood." He gestured to the small, elegant building behind her, with its understated sign and beautiful display windows. "You seem like someone who appreciates quiet beauty over commercial flash. Loud galleries with trendy art wouldn't suit you. You'd want something more substantial." This one felt right. Emily should have been disturbed by this reasoning. Should have been alarmed that he had tracked her down based on a passing comment and his own deductions. Instead, she felt seen, understood in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "That's a little intense," she said carefully, watching his face for any sign of the obsession she should probably be worried about. "Perhaps." Gavino pushed off the lamppost and walked closer, though he stopped at a respectful distance. Close enough to talk without shouting, far enough that she didn't feel crowded. But I wanted to make sure you were all right, that you hadn't spent the day drowning in the pain of what happened. That's all. No ulterior motives, no expectations. You sent me flowers. You needed to remember your worth. Flowers seemed appropriate. He tilted his head slightly. Did I overstep? If I made you uncomfortable, I apologize. That wasn't my intention. No, they were beautiful. They are beautiful. Emily clutched her bag tighter. I just don't understand why you care. You don't know me. I'd like to, though. Know you? I mean. Gavino's dark eyes held hers, and Emily felt like she was falling into them. If you'll allow it. Emily studied him in the streetlight, seeing details she had missed in the restaurant's dim lighting. He was dressed more casually today, still elegant, but in dark slacks and a charcoal cashmere sweater that emphasized his powerful build. Up close, she could see that despite his age, his body was strong, well-maintained. He looked like he could have been a model in his youth, all sharp angles and dramatic features. Now, he looked like something more. Someone who commanded rooms without saying a word, who made decisions that affected lives, who carried weight she couldn't see but could somehow feel. How old are you? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and Emily felt her face heat with embarrassment. Sorry, that's rude. Gavino's smile widened slightly, showing straight white teeth. 60 and you're 24, I'm guessing. Emily's eyes widened. How did you? Your energy. The way you move through the world, like you're still discovering who you are, still becoming. His gaze softened, becoming almost tender. The way you wore your heartbreak last night, like it was the first time you'd truly been betrayed. That kind of devastation comes from still believing the world is fundamentally good. You haven't learned to protect yourself yet. It's not a criticism. It's beautiful, rare. I'm not looking for anything, Emily said quickly, her heart racing. She needed to establish boundaries to protect herself from whatever this was becoming. I just got out of a relationship, a serious relationship. I'm not ready for. I know, and I'm not asking for anything. Gavino took a small step back, as if to prove his point, giving her more space. I simply want to make sure you were well, that you weren't alone with your pain, that someone in this city knew you mattered. That's all. But it wasn't all. Emily could feel it in the air between them. The crackle of something neither had named but both recognized. Chemistry, maybe. Connection. The sense that they had met before in some other life. Some other version of reality, where a 60-year-old Italian man and a 24-year-old American woman made perfect sense. Would you like to have dinner? Gavino asked, his voice casual, but his eyes intense. No expectations, just conversation. I promise to be perfectly boring if that helps you feel more comfortable. Emily laughed despite herself, the sound startling in the quiet street. Somehow I doubt you're capable of being boring. Then you'll have to find out yourself. Gavino's smile was gentle, encouraging. One meal. If you hate it, I'll never bother you again. But if you enjoy it. He trailed off, letting the possibility hang between them. She should have said no. Should have gone home, processed her breakup, given herself time to heal. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was too fast, too intense, too much. But there was something about Gavino that made her feel safe and electrified all at once. A contradiction she couldn't explain but couldn't deny. Looking at him, seeing the genuine hope in his eyes mixed with respect for whatever decision she made, Emily realized something important. For the first time since Derek, since the breakup, since everything fell apart, she wanted to say yes to something. Wanted to move forward instead of backward. Wanted to be brave instead of safe. Okay, she heard herself say, her voice stronger than she felt, dinner. His smile was subtle but genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. Tomorrow evening, I'll pick you up at 7. You don't know where I live. Gavino pulled out his phone, expensive, sleek, probably the latest model, and handed it to her. His hands were warm when they brushed hers, the contact brief, but electric. Then perhaps you'll tell me. Emily typed in her address with trembling fingers, hyper-aware of his proximity, of the way he smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Something warmer and more personal. Sandalwood, maybe cedar, things that grew slowly and lasted forever. When she handed it back, their fingers brushed again, longer this time, and the contact sent heat racing up her arm. Gavino noticed. She could tell by the way his jaw tightened slightly, by the way his eyes darkened just a fraction, by the way his breathing changed rhythm for just a moment. "Tomorrow," he said softly, his voice dropping to something lower, more intimate. Then he turned and walked away into the gathering dusk, leaving Emily standing there on the sidewalk, wondering what had just happened to her carefully ordered world. She stood there long after he disappeared around the corner, her heart pounding, her fingers still tingling from where they'd touched his. The roses waited in her office behind her. Tomorrow waited ahead of her. And for the first time in 24 hours, Emily felt something other than pain. She felt anticipation, possibility, hope, and it terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The next evening, Emily changed clothes 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. Nothing felt right. Everything felt too young or too casual or too desperate. Her tiny apartment bedroom looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes scattered across every surface, shoes littering the floor. She tried on a red dress, too sexy, like she was trying too hard. A casual sundress, too young, like she was emphasizing their age difference. A pantsuit, too formal, like she was going to a job interview instead of dinner. Finally, she settled on a simple black dress that hit just above her knee, elegant without being showy, that made her curves look good without being obvious about it. She paired it with simple gold jewelry and black heels that made her legs look longer. Her natural hair was pulled back in a low bun that showed off her neck and face. Minimal makeup. She'd never been one for heavy cosmetics, just enough to enhance her features. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone who looked put together, confident, like she knew her own worth. It was a lie. But maybe if she looked the part, she could start to believe it. At exactly 7, Gavino knocked. Emily appreciated the punctuality. Derek had always been late, making her wait, making her feel like her time didn't matter. When she opened the door, she found Gavino holding a single white rose. Not a dozen, not an overwhelming gesture, just one perfect bloom, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent and utilities combined. Navy blue, perfectly tailored to his frame with a crisp white shirt and no tie. Elegant but not stuffy. Powerful but approachable. "You look beautiful," he said, simply offering her the rose. Not "you clean up nice" or "wow" or any of the casual comments Derek used to throw at her. Just a simple statement of fact delivered with such sincerity that Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You clean up nice yourself," Emily replied, accepting the rose and trying to calm her racing pulse. Up close, she could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes, the strong line of his jaw beneath his beard, the way his suit jacket stretched slightly across his broad shoulders. Gavino's car was waiting outside, the same sleek black Mercedes from before. But this time he opened the door himself instead of letting the driver do it. His hand touched her lower back lightly, respectfully, as she slid inside, barely more than a brush of fingertips through fabric, but it left her skin burning like he'd pressed his palm there bare. The touch was brief, proper, completely appropriate, and yet, it felt like the most intimate thing anyone had done to her in months. Derek had never touched her like that, with care, with attention, like her comfort mattered more than his own convenience. Gavino slid into the driver's seat. No driver tonight, just the two of them, and pulled into traffic with the kind of confidence that came from years of navigating both cars and life. He drove smoothly, efficiently, one hand on the wheel, the other resting casually on the center console between them. "Where are we going?" Emily asked, watching the city lights blur past her window. "A place I think you'll like," Gavino said, glancing at her with a small smile. "Trust me." And strangely, impossibly, she did. He took her to a restaurant she'd never heard of. A small private place tucked away in the hills outside the city, accessible only by a winding road that climbed higher and higher until the valley spread out below them like a carpet of lights. The restaurant itself was beautiful but understated, built into the hillside with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the view. "How did you find this place?" Emily asked as they were led to a table on the terrace. The night air was cool but comfortable, the city glittering below like fallen stars. "I own it," Gavino said casually, as if owning restaurants was perfectly normal. He pulled out her chair himself, waiting until she was settled before taking his own seat across from her. Emily blinked, processing this information. "You own it," What do you do exactly? I'm in business, import-export, primarily. Some real estate, various investments. He spoke dismissively, like his work was the least interesting thing about him. But tonight, I'd rather talk about you. There's not much to tell. I doubt that very much. Gavino leaned back in his chair, studying her with that intense focus that made her feel like the only person in the world. Tell me about your art. How did you know? Emily started, then stopped. Of course, he knew. He'd found her gallery, sent her flowers. He'd been paying attention in ways Derek never had. You work in a gallery. You chose it specifically because it's quiet and beautiful, because you value substance over flash. You appreciate art deeply. I could see it in your face when you talked about your work. Gavino's gaze was warm, encouraging. But do you create it? Emily hesitated. This was the dream she never spoke aloud, the secret hope she'd kept locked away, because admitting it made her vulnerable to failure, to judgment, to the crushing weight of her own inadequacy. Derek had known she painted, but he'd never asked to see her work, had never expressed interest in what she created, had treated it like a hobby instead of a passion. Finally, she nodded. I paint, nothing serious, just for myself. What do you paint? Feelings, mostly abstract things. Colors and shapes that represent emotions I can't put into words. Emily's hands moved as she talked, gesturing, trying to express what she couldn't adequately explain. Like, heartbreak isn't just sad. It's blue but also gray, but also these sharp lines of red where the pain is most acute. And joy isn't just yellow, it's gold and orange. And these bursts of white where everything feels possible. Gavino's expression had softened into something Emily couldn't name. Admiration, understanding, something deeper. I'd like to see your work sometime, he said quietly, if you'd be willing to share it. It's not very good. Let me decide that. Gavino's tone left no room for argument, but it wasn't demanding. It was confident, like he already knew her work would be good because she'd created it, and therefore it had value. The waiter arrived with their food, all vegetarian dishes, beautifully plated that Gavino ordered without looking at the menu. Everything was exquisite, fresh, prepared with obvious care. Roasted vegetables with herbs Emily couldn't identify, but tasted incredible. Handmade pasta with a simple tomato sauce that was somehow better than anything complicated. A salad with greens so fresh they must have been picked that day. You're vegetarian? Emily asked between bites, watching him eat with the same deliberate care he applied to everything else. For 30 years now. I believe in doing as little harm as possible. He smiled slightly, something dark flickering behind his eyes. In most areas of my life, at least. There was something in the way he said it. Something complicated and dangerous hiding beneath the surface, like an iceberg with most of its mass underwater. But before Emily could ask what he meant, Gavino changed the subject with the skill of someone accustomed to deflecting personal questions. Tell me about your family. They talked for hours, the food and wine flowing easily between them. Emily found herself opening up in ways she never had before. About her parents who divorced when she was 10. About the custody battles that made her feel like a prize to be won instead of a person to be loved. About growing up feeling caught between two worlds, two homes, never quite belonging fully in either place. About her dreams of becoming a real artist someday, of seeing her work in galleries, of creating something meaningful that would outlast her. Gavino listened to every word like it mattered. Like she mattered, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just waiting for his turn to talk. He remembered details Derek would have forgotten in seconds. He made connections between things she said, understanding her in ways that felt both comfortable and terrifying. What about you? Emily finally asked, realizing she'd been talking for almost an hour straight. Do you have family? Something shuddered in Gavino's expression. Walls coming up that hadn't been there before. I did once a long time ago. He paused, his hand stilling on his wine glass. My mother died when I was 12, cancer. My father died when I was 15, heart attack, though I suspect grief played a role. After that, I raised myself. I'm so sorry, Emily said, her heart aching for the boy he'd been alone in the world at an age when most kids were worrying about homework and sports. Don't be. It made me strong. It made me self-reliant. Made me careful about who I let into my life because I learned early that everyone leaves eventually. Gavino's gaze met hers intense and searching. But I've also learned that family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's about loyalty, about choosing people who choose you back, about building something that lasts, not because you're obligated to, but because you want to. That's beautiful, Emily whispered, feeling tears prick her eyes. She didn't know why his words affected her so deeply, but they did. Maybe because Derek and Maya's betrayal had taught her the same lesson, that DNA and history didn't guarantee loyalty. That sometimes the people you thought you knew best were the ones who hurt you most. It's survival, Gavino corrected gently, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. His palm was warm, his fingers gentle. But tonight is not for sad stories. Tonight is for remembering that life continues. That joy still exists even after pain. That beauty persists even after betrayal. After dinner, Gavino drove her home himself. The car filled with silence that felt comfortable instead of awkward. Music played softly, classical Italian, something with strings that sounded like romance and longing. Emily watched the city lights blur past her window, feeling fuller than she had in days, both physically and emotionally. When they reached her apartment building, a modest complex in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy, but clean and safe, Gavino walked her to the door like a gentleman from another era. He moved slowly, giving her time to tell him to leave if she wanted, respecting her space even as everything in his body language said he wanted to be closer. "Thank you," Emily said, turning to face him at her door. The hallway light was dim, casting shadows across his face that made him look younger and older all at once. "For tonight, for yesterday, for the flowers, for everything. Thank you for trusting me," Gavino replied, his voice low and rough. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face that had escaped her bun. His fingers lingered just a moment too long against her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw with such tenderness that Emily's breath caught. "You deserve to be treasured, Emily Hayes. I hope you're beginning to remember that." Then he stepped back deliberately, creating distance between them, and walked away down the hall. Emily stood there, her cheek burning where he'd touched her, her heart pounding against her ribs, wondering how a man she barely knew had managed to reach into her chest and rearrange everything. She went inside and leaned against her door, sliding down to sit on the floor, pressing her hand to her face where his fingers had been. The apartment felt too empty, too quiet. She could still smell his cologne, could still feel the ghost of his touch, could still hear his voice, saying her name like it was something precious. Derek had never looked at her the way Gavino did, had never touched her with such reverence, had never made her feel like she was something rare and valuable that needed to be handled with care. Emily pulled out her phone and stared at it, half expecting a text from Derek, but there was nothing. He'd finally stopped trying, finally given up. And instead of feeling sad about it, she felt relieved, free, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She went to her bedroom and changed into pajamas, then stood before the small easel in the corner, where her current painting waited. It was an abstract piece she'd started weeks ago before Derek, before the betrayal, when her life had felt stable, if not exactly exciting. Now looking at it, she saw how lifeless it was, how safe, how afraid. Emily picked up her brush and added new colors, deep blues and silvers, warm golds, sharp lines of red, painting over what had been safe and boring, creating something new from the ruins of the old, just like Gavino was helping her do with her life. Over the next week, Gavino appeared in her life like clockwork, not overwhelming, not suffocating, just there in ways that made her days brighter, her burdens lighter. He showed up at the gallery on Tuesday with lunch, gourmet sandwiches from a shop she'd mentioned loving once in passing. How he'd remembered, she didn't know. They ate in her tiny office, talking about art and food and their favorite books. Gavino was well-read, intelligent, able to discuss everything from classical literature to contemporary philosophy. Talking to him felt like exercise for her brain, challenging and stimulating in the best way. On Wednesday, a package arrived at her apartment, a book of Italian poetry, leather-bound and beautiful, with passages marked in careful handwriting. The marked passages were all about discovery, about finding beauty in unexpected places, about how the heart knows things the mind hasn't learned yet. Gavino had written notes in the margins explaining context, translating phrases that didn't work in English, sharing his thoughts on what the poets meant. It was the most thoughtful gift Emily had ever received. Not expensive necessarily, though the book clearly was, but personal. Chosen specifically for her, marked up with his own thoughts like he was sharing a piece of himself. On Thursday, he called just to ask about her day. They talked for 2 hours about nothing important: her frustrating customer at the gallery, his meeting with a difficult supplier, what they'd each had for lunch, whether it was going to rain this weekend. Normal, everyday conversation that felt intimate because he genuinely cared about her answers. On Friday, he invited her to a charity event. "I need a date," he said simply when he called, "and I'd like it to be you, but I understand if it's too much, too soon. These events can be overwhelming. Lots of people, lots of questions." "What's the charity?" Emily asked, twisting the phone cord around her finger. "Children's education in underserved communities, providing art supplies and music instruments to schools that can't afford them." Gavino's voice warmed with genuine passion. "I believe every child deserves access to beauty, to creativity. Art saved me when I was young and alone. It might save someone else. How could she say no to that?" "Okay, I'll come. Truly, you don't have to." "I want to," Emily interrupted, and she did. She wanted to see Gavino in his element, wanted to meet his world, wanted to understand more about this man who was quickly becoming central to her thoughts. "Then I'll pick you up at 7 tomorrow. Wear something formal. These events tend to be rather fancy." He paused. "Emily, yes, thank you for saying yes, for giving me chances I probably don't deserve." "Stop saying that," Emily said firmly. "You deserve good things too, Gavino, not just me. You." His silence spoke volumes, then softly. "You're teaching me to believe that slowly, but you are." The charity event was held at a luxury hotel downtown, the kind with marble floors and crystal chandeliers and staff in white gloves. Emily felt out of place in her simple cocktail dress, which was the most formal thing she owned, until Gavino took her arm and whispered, "You're the most beautiful woman here. Hold your head high." And somehow, with his steady presence beside her, his hand warm and solid at the small of her back, she believed him. She walked into that ballroom like she belonged there, and people made space for her, smiled at her, treated her like someone important simply because she was with Gavino. Throughout the evening, Emily watched Gavino work the room. He moved through crowds like a shark through water, smooth, powerful, commanding attention without demanding it. People approached him with respect that bordered on fear. Men shook his hand carefully like they were handling something dangerous. Women smiled but kept their distance, aware of invisible boundaries. Important people, powerful people sought his attention. Emily recognized faces from the news: politicians, business leaders, celebrities. They all treated Gavino like he was someone who mattered, someone whose opinion carried weight, someone whose favor was valuable. "Who are you really?" Emily asked quietly during a break in the conversations when they'd stepped onto a balcony for fresh air. Gavino's smile was enigmatic, secretive. "I'm exactly who I said I was, a businessman. Someone who imports goods and exports others. Someone who values loyalty and punishes betrayal. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give right now." Gavino turned to face her, his expression serious. "My world is complicated, Emily. I exist in spaces where power matters more than morality sometimes. Where connections are currency and weakness can be fatal. I'm not ashamed of what I've built, but I'm aware it's not normal." "Are you dangerous?" Emily asked, her heart pounding. Gavino considered the question carefully. "To people who threaten what's mine, yes, very. To you." He cupped her face gently, his thumb stroking her cheek. "Never. I would burn the world down before I let anything hurt you." It should have frightened her. The intensity of his declaration, the darkness in his eyes, the promise of violence for her sake. Instead, Emily felt protected. Safe, cherished in a way she'd never experienced. Before she could respond, a voice interrupted them. "Gavino," a man said, his tone falsely friendly. "Good to see you." They turned to find a younger man, maybe 35, handsome in a conventional way, wearing an expensive suit and a predatory smile. Emily immediately disliked him, though she couldn't say why. "Andrew," Gavino said, his voice cooling several degrees. His hand moved to Emily's waist, pulling her subtly closer to his side in a possessive gesture that was as clear as a spoken claim. Andrew's gaze shifted to Emily, traveling over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. His smile widened. "And who is this stunning creature?" "This is Emily," Gavino said, his tone leaving no room for interpretation. "My date." Something in his voice made Andrew step back slightly, survival instincts kicking in. But the younger man's eyes still lingered on Emily in a way that made her uncomfortable. Made her want to hide behind Gavino. Made her want to leave this balcony and never see Andrew again. "Lucky man," Andrew said, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. Then to Emily directly. "If you ever get tired of older company, I'd love to show you what a younger man can offer. Someone more your age, more your speed." The temperature dropped to 10 degrees. Gavino's expression didn't change dramatically, but Emily felt his hand tighten on her waist, felt the tension radiating from his body like heat from a furnace, felt something dangerous uncaging itself in the man beside her. "Andrew," Gavino said quietly, each word precise and deadly as a knife strike. "Walk away now, or I'll make you regret every word you just said. Not here, not tonight, but soon. And you'll remember it for the rest of your significantly shortened life." Andrew paled, his bravado crumbling. He took 2 steps back, nearly stumbling. "I didn't mean." "Yes, you did. And that's the problem." Gavino's smile was cold, empty of warmth or humor. "Leave now before I change my mind about letting you walk away at all." Andrew fled into the ballroom, disappearing into the crowd like a rat into shadows. Emily looked up at Gavino, her heart pounding. That was disrespectful. Gavino finished, his jaw still tight with barely controlled rage. "Disrespectful to you, and I don't tolerate disrespect toward people I care about. Toward you especially, people he cared about." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to explore, but they both felt the weight of them, the promise, the claim. Gavino said suddenly, "I've fulfilled my obligations here, and I don't want you in the same room as that man for another moment." They left the event early, Gavino's hand never leaving the small of her back as they navigated through the crowds. People moved aside for them, sensing something dangerous in Gavino's energy, something barely controlled that made them want to give him space. The car ride back was silent and charged, filled with tension that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with something Emily wasn't ready to name. Gavino drove with one hand clenched on the wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw tight. He was furious, not at her, she knew, but at Andrew, at the disrespect, at the threat to something he was clearly beginning to see as his. When they reached Emily's apartment, Gavino walked her to the door like always. But this time, something was different. He stood closer. His breathing was heavier. His control was slipping. "Emily," he said, his voice rough like gravel, "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered. "What?" "I'm not a good man." The words came out pained like they hurt to say. "I've done things, built my life on foundations that would frighten you if you knew the details. I've hurt people. I've made decisions that served my interests over others' lives. I'm powerful because I was willing to do what others wouldn't." "Gavino, let me finish, please." He took a shaky breath. "But with you, I want to be better. I want to be the man you deserve. The man who would make you proud instead of ashamed. I don't know if I can completely shed who I've been, but I'm willing to try for you. Because of you." Emily reached up and touched his face, her palm against his bearded cheek, feeling the roughness of it, the warmth of his skin, the realness of him. "I don't need you to be perfect, Gavino. I just need you to be honest, to tell me the truth, even when it's ugly, even when it's hard." Something broke in his expression. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, every opportunity to say no, and pressed his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. "God, help me. I'm falling so hard it terrifies me. I told myself I was too old, too damaged, too dangerous for this, but I can't stop. I don't want to stop." "Good." Emily breathed, her hand sliding up to cup his face, to hold him there, to keep him close because I'm falling too. And it's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't understand it. But I don't want it to stop either. They stood there for a long moment, breathing the same air, their foreheads pressed together, neither willing to close the final distance, but both desperate to. The hallway was empty, quiet except for their breathing and the distant sound of someone's television through thin walls. Finally, Gavino pulled back with visible effort, his hands shaking slightly as they released her. Not tonight. Not when I can't trust myself to stop. Not when you deserve better than a hallway and stolen kisses. He pecked her forehead gently and walked away. Emily leaned against her door, her whole body trembling, wondering how much longer she could survive this beautiful, terrible tension building between them, like a storm waiting to break. 2 days later, Emily's phone rang at midnight. She grabbed it groggy, her heart jumping when she saw Gavino's name illuminated on the screen. "Hello," she answered, suddenly wide awake, worry flooding through her. Midnight calls were never good news. "I'm sorry to call so late." His voice sounded strained, tired in a way she hadn't heard before. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you, about that night, about Andrew, and what he said." Emily sat up in bed, pulling her blanket around her shoulders against the night chill. "Are you okay?" Gavino paused and she heard him take a breath. "No, I'm not okay. I'm lying in my bed alone thinking about you lying in yours. And all I can think about is how much I want to be there with you. How much I want to hold you. How much I hate that there's distance between us." Emily's chest tightened with emotion. "Tell me something," she said softly. "Something small. Something that makes you happy." Gavino was quiet for a moment, thinking. Rain on windows, the sound of it drumming against glass. The way it makes everything outside look soft and blurred, like the world is being gently washed clean. When I was a boy, after my mother died, I used to lie in bed and listen to the rain and pretend it was washing away all the bad things, making everything new again. "That's beautiful," Emily whispered, tears pricking her eyes at the vulnerability in his admission, at the image of a young Gavino seeking comfort in the rain. "What about you? What makes you happy?" "You," Emily said without thinking. "Talking to you, being with you, the way you make me feel like I matter, like I'm worth something more than I thought I was. Emily, you're worth everything. You're worth more than I can express." They talked until 3 in the morning about nothing and everything, about childhood memories and favorite foods, and the kind of life they each dreamed of living. When they finally hung up, Emily felt like she knew him better. Like every conversation peeled back another layer, revealing more of the man beneath the power and danger. The next morning, she woke to find a package at her door. Inside was a professional recording of rain sounds, gentle, steady rainfall that sounded like it was right outside her window, along with a note written in Gavino's careful hand. "For the nights when the world is too quiet and you need to remember that everything can be washed clean. For the nights when you can't sleep and I'm not there to talk you through it. For the nights when you need to know someone is thinking of you." Emily pressed the note to her chest, feeling something dangerous and wonderful blooming in her heart. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This wasn't just chemistry or loneliness seeking comfort. This was real. This was her falling in love with a man who was completely wrong for her on paper, but felt absolutely right in reality. She put the rain sounds on her nightstand, played them softly, and realized she was smiling. Derek had never given her anything that showed this level of thought, this level of attention to who she really was and what she needed. That evening, Gavino picked her up for dinner at his home. She'd never been to his house before. And when they pulled through the gates of a massive estate in the hills overlooking the city, Emily's breath caught in her throat. "You live here?" she asked, staring at the sprawling villa that looked like it had been transplanted directly from Tuscany. Stone walls, terracotta roof tiles, sprawling gardens with olive trees and lavender and roses. It was stunning. "It's too big for one person," Gavino admitted, helping her from the car with his usual care. "But it reminds me of home, of Italy, of where I came from before America called to me." Inside the house was even more impressive. High ceilings with exposed beams, tile floors in warm terracotta, walls painted in soft creams and golds. But despite its size and elegance, it felt warm somehow. There were books everywhere in the living room, the hallway piled on tables, art on the walls, mostly landscapes and still lives, beautiful but not showy. Fresh flowers and vases, signs of life. Gavino led her to the kitchen, which was enormous and professional, but clearly well used. Pots and pans hung from a rack overhead. Herbs grew in pots on the windowsill. The smell of something delicious cooking filled the air. "You cook?" Emily asked, surprised yet again by this man who kept revealing new depths. My mother taught me before she died. She said, "A man who cannot feed himself cannot feed his family. That food is love made tangible." He handed her a glass of red wine. Italian, she assumed, probably from his homeland. It's one of the few memories I have of her that doesn't hurt anymore. Time has softened it from pain to sweetness. Emily heard the grief beneath his words. Old but still present. How long has it been? 48 years. I was 12 when she died. Gavino stirred the sauce on the stove, his movements practiced and precise. The motions of someone who'd done this thousands of times. My father lasted 3 more years before his heart gave out. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but I've always believed it was grief. He couldn't live without her. Didn't want to. That's so sad, Emily whispered. It's also beautiful in a way to love someone so much that life without them feels impossible. Gavino turned to look at her, his gaze intense and searching. I used to think that kind of love was weakness, that it made my father vulnerable, made him less. But now, he trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished. But his meaning was clear. Now he understood. Now he was starting to feel that way about her. After my father died, I was 15 and alone. I had to grow up fast. Had to learn to survive in a world that didn't care about orphan boys, with no one to protect them. Gavino's voice was matter of fact, but Emily heard the pain underneath. I raised myself, built my empire from nothing. Learned to be hard because softness got you killed. And now, Emily asked softly, now I'm 60 years old, and I'm learning that maybe hardness isn't the only way to survive. That maybe letting someone in isn't weakness. He smiled slightly. You're teaching me that slowly. But you are. Emily crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her face against his back. She felt him stiffen in surprise, then relax one of his hands, covering both of hers where they rested on his stomach. Thank you for letting me in, she whispered. For trusting me with your pain. Thank you for making me feel like trust is possible, Gavino replied, his voice rough with emotion. They stood like that for a long moment, connected, before Gavino gently disentangled himself to finish cooking. But something had shifted between them, another wall down, another step closer to whatever this was becoming. Come, Gavino said, handing her a knife and a cutting board full of vegetables. Help me finish this. I want to teach you how to make my mother's sauce. It's the only piece of her I have left to give. They cooked together in comfortable silence, Gavino guiding her hands, showing her how to cut the tomatoes just right, how much garlic to add, how to taste and adjust. The kitchen filled with steam and spices and laughter when Emily accidentally added too much salt, and Gavino had to rescue the sauce with humor and quick thinking. They ate dinner on the terrace overlooking the valley, the city lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. The food was simple but perfect, pasta with fresh vegetables, crusty bread Gavino had baked that morning, a light salad with a vinaigrette that tasted like sunshine and herbs. This is incredible, Emily said between bites, savoring every flavor. You really could have been a chef. I had other obligations, Gavino said quietly, his gaze distant. My father's business required my attention when he died. I couldn't pursue simpler dreams. I had responsibilities, people depending on me, legacy to uphold. What business? Gavino set down his fork, his expression becoming serious, guarded. Import-export, as I told you. But it's more complicated than that. My family has connections throughout Italy and America. Business relationships that span continents. Some legal, some. He paused, less so. Emily's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm, giving him space to explain. Are you saying you're? I'm saying I exist in a world where power matters more than morality sometimes. Where loyalty is currency and weakness can be fatal. Where the rules that govern normal people don't always apply. His dark eyes held hers unflinching. Honest. I'm telling you this because I won't lie to you. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. If you choose to walk away now, I'll understand. I'll be devastated, but I'll understand. But if you stay, you need to know what you're stepping into. Emily should have been afraid. Any reasonable person would have been. She should have thanked him for dinner, called a taxi, and never looked back. But looking at Gavino, at this man who sent her rain sounds and cooked her his mother's recipes, and looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life, she felt only certainty. I'm not walking away, she said firmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You've been honest with me. You've treated me with more respect and care than anyone ever has. Whatever world you exist in, whatever you've done to survive, that's your past. I care about who you are now, who you want to become. Gavino closed his eyes briefly, relief washing over his features so powerfully that for a moment he looked younger, vulnerable. When he opened them again, they were blazing with emotion, and he no longer tried to hide. Then you need to understand something else, he said, his voice low and intense, each word deliberate. I am not a man who does anything halfway. I don't have casual relationships or temporary connections. If I claim you, I claim all of you. Your safety becomes my responsibility. Your happiness becomes my mission. Your enemies become mine to destroy. That sounds very possessive, Emily said. But her voice shook with something that definitely wasn't fear. It was excitement, anticipation, the thrill of being wanted so completely. It is, Gavino agreed without apology. I warned you. I'm not a good man in many ways, but I will be good to you. I will protect you with everything I have. I will treasure you like the precious thing you are. He leaned forward, his gaze pinning her in place. The question is whether you can accept that kind of devotion, that kind of intensity. Because once I claim you as mine, Emily, I won't let go easily. Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. Everything about this should have terrified her. The possessiveness, the intensity, the barely contained obsession she saw in his eyes. But it didn't, because underneath all of that was care, was protection. Was a man who'd spent his entire life being hard, finally finding someone he wanted to be soft with. I've never had anyone protect me before, she said honestly, her voice shaking with emotion. I've always had to protect myself, take care of myself, fight my own battles alone. Not anymore. Gavino reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. The touch both comforting and electrifying, both innocent and promise-laden. Never again if you let me. Let me be your shield, your safety, your home. They sat there, hands joined, the night air cool around them, the city lights twinkling below, both standing on the edge of something that would change everything. Emily could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This wasn't just agreeing to date someone. This was accepting someone into her life completely, accepting protection and intensity, and devotion that bordered on obsession. But when she looked into Gavino's eyes and saw the raw hope there, the desperate need mixed with respect for her choice, she knew her answer had been decided the moment he'd invited her to sit at his table that rainy night. Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it. To you, to us, to whatever this becomes. Gavino's smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He stood and pulled her up with him into his arms, holding her close enough that she could feel his heart pounding as hard as hers. You won't regret this, he promised against her hair. I'll make sure of it every single day. Later that night, Gavino showed her his library, a massive room that took up an entire wing of the house, filled with books in multiple languages, floor-to-ceiling shelves, stuffed with everything from ancient philosophy to contemporary fiction. Emily wandered through the aisles, running her fingers along the spines, feeling like she'd discovered a secret part of his soul. This is beautiful, she breathed, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of knowledge surrounding her. You've read all of these. Most of them, some multiple times. Gavino leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore with a soft expression. These books saved me when I was young and angry and alone. When I had no one to teach me how to be a man, I learned from them. They showed me there were other ways to be powerful, other ways to survive beyond violence and fear. Emily pulled out a volume at random. Homer's Odyssey. The pages worn and marked with notes in the margins. What did this one teach you? That even the strongest men need help sometimes. That pride can be your downfall. That the journey home is often more important than the destination. Gavino pushed off the doorframe and walked to her, taking the book gently from her hands. That sometimes the monsters we face are reflections of our own inner darkness. You're not a monster, Emily said firmly. I've done monstrous things, Gavino countered quietly. Hurt people who threatened what was mine. Destroyed enemies without mercy. Built my empire on fear as much as respect. And now I'm trying to be better for you because you make me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. He set the book aside and cupped her face in both hands. You're changing me, Emily, making me remember the boy I was before the world taught me to be dangerous. And I don't know whether to thank you or apologize for how completely you're undoing me. Thank me, Emily whispered, rising on her toes to bring her face closer to his. Always thank me, because I'm not undoing you. I'm helping you become who you were always meant to be underneath all the armor. They kissed, and when they finally pulled apart, neither of them wanted to step back. I want you to stay, Gavino said roughly, his voice barely more than a growl. Just asleep. I won't. I just need you near. I need to know you're here, safe with me. Emily nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Gavino led her through the house to a guest room, beautifully appointed with soft bedding and tasteful furniture with fresh flowers on the nightstand, filling the air with the scent of roses. He gave her clothes to sleep in, his own shirt that fell to her mid-thigh, and soft cotton pants that she had to roll. At the waist they smelled like him, like sandalwood and cedar and something uniquely Gavino. I'm right next door if you need anything, he said from the doorway, his eyes dark with want, but also with respect, with care, with restraint that clearly cost him. Gavino, yes. Thank you for being patient with me, for not pushing, for giving me time even when I know you want more. His smile was gentle, full of emotion. Emily, I would wait forever if that's what you needed. Some things, some people, are worth any amount of time. You could make me wait a decade, and I'd count every day a blessing, because at least I got to know you existed. He closed the door softly, and Emily lay awake for hours in his shirt, surrounded by his scent, her heart too full to sleep. She could hear him moving around in the next room, could picture him lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, as unable to rest as she was around 2 in the morning. She gave up on sleep and padded quietly out of her room. The house was dark except for small lights along the baseboards. She found Gavino in the kitchen making tea, wearing just pajama pants and looking devastatingly handsome in the dim light. Can't sleep, he asked, not turning around. How did you know it was me? I've been listening for you. Hoping you'd come find me, he turned, offering her a cup of chamomile. I've been lying in bed, torturing myself by knowing you're so close, but still too far. Emily took the tea, their fingers brushing, both of them hyper-aware of every point of contact. Can we just sit together until we're tired? I'd like that. They settled on the couch in his living room, a respectful distance between them at first. But gradually, naturally, they drifted closer until Emily was tucked against his side, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His other hand played with her fingers, tracing patterns on her palm, touch grounding them both. Tell me about your sister, Emily said softly, remembering he'd mentioned her once. Gavino went still for a moment. Then slowly he began to speak. Her name was Isabella. She was 8 years younger than me, 15 when she died. She had dark hair like mine and my mother's smile. She wanted to be a teacher, loved children, loved books, loved making people happy. What happened? She was caught in the crossfire of my father's war with a rival family. Wrong place, wrong time. She was walking home from school. His voice was hollow, empty of everything but old pain. I was 25, had just taken over the business. I thought I could protect everyone. Thought I was invincible, but I failed her. Emily lifted her head to look at him, seeing tears on his cheeks that he wasn't bothering to hide. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I was supposed to keep her safe. That was my job as her brother, as the head of the family, and I failed. Gavino looked at her, his eyes haunted. I see her in you sometimes. That brightness, that belief that the world can be good despite evidence to the contrary, that innocence. I'm not innocent, Emily protested gently. Not innocent, perhaps, but uncorrupted by the things I've seen, the things I've done. You still believe in goodness, in love, in happy endings. His hand came up to cup her face, and it terrifies me that I'll fail you the way I failed her, that I'll get you killed just by loving you. Listen to me, Emily said fiercely, taking his face in both her hands. I am not your sister. I am not a child who needs constant protection. I am a grown woman who chose you with full knowledge that your world is dangerous, and whatever happens, it won't be your failure. It will be life, and we'll face it together. I can't lose you, Gavino whispered, his voice breaking. I can't survive losing someone else I love. You won't lose me because I'm not going anywhere. Emily kissed him softly, tasting salt from his tears. We're going to figure this out. We're going to build something good together, and we're going to be happy. Do you hear me? We deserve happiness. Gavino pulled her into his lap, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her neck. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. 48 years of grief and guilt and fear finally breaking free. Emily held him through it, stroking his hair, whispering reassurances, letting him be vulnerable in a way he probably hadn't been since he was that 15-year-old boy alone in the world. They stayed like that until dawn, neither sleeping, both finding comfort in physical closeness, in shared vulnerability, in the growing certainty that whatever this was between them, it was real. It was worth fighting for. It was worth any risk. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Gavino lifted his head and looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I love you," he said simply, the words falling between them like stones into still water, creating ripples that would spread forever. "I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy, but I love you. I've probably loved you since that first night when you walked in soaking wet. And let me help you." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you too. I know I shouldn't. I know it's fast, but I do. I love you so much it scares me." Butterflies raced in Emily's heart, and she felt herself falling and falling into something that felt like flying. The next morning, they woke still tangled together on the couch, stiff and slightly uncomfortable, but neither willing to admit it. Gavino made breakfast, fresh fruit and yogurt and warm bread, and they ate on the terrace in comfortable silence, both processing the emotions of the night before. "I have meetings today," Gavino said reluctantly, like the words physically pained him. "Business I can't avoid. People depending on decisions only I can make. But tonight, I want to take you somewhere special." "Where?" "It's a surprise." He reached across the table and tucked her hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Wear something comfortable. Dress for adventure. And trust me." "I do trust you," Emily said, meaning it completely fully without reservation. Gavino's expression softened into something tender and odd. "That's the most precious gift anyone has ever given me. Your trust, your faith, the belief that I'm worth the risk you're taking." He drove her home himself, kissing her goodbye at her door, with a promise to return that evening. Emily floated through her day in a daze, barely able to focus on work, her mind replaying every moment, every touch, every word. Emma noticed, of course, commenting on Emily's constant smile. But Emily just shrugged mysteriously, not ready to share this yet, wanting to keep it private and precious a little longer. That evening, Gavino picked her up wearing jeans and a leather jacket, casual in a way she'd never seen him, looking younger and more relaxed and devastatingly handsome. He looked like he could have been a model or a movie star, someone whose face belonged on magazines instead of in boardrooms making dangerous decisions. "Where are we going?" Emily asked as they drove away from the city, heading into open countryside. "You'll see. Patience." They drove for over an hour, the city falling away behind them, replaced by rolling hills and farmland, and eventually the distant glitter of ocean. They finally stopped at a small private airfield where a helicopter waited, gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Emily's eyes widened. "You're kidding." Gavino grinned, a real boyish grin that made her heart flip. "I told you to trust me." The helicopter lifted into the sky, and Emily gripped Gavino's hand tightly, half terrified and half thrilled as the ground fell away beneath them. The city became a toy model, then disappeared entirely, replaced by the golden California coast, the ocean stretching endlessly to the horizon, the sun beginning its descent in a sky painted orange and pink and purple. They landed on a private beach, completely deserted with a small cottage nestled among the sand dunes and wild grass. The beach stretched in both directions as far as Emily could see. Pristine sand, crashing waves, seabirds wheeling overhead in the fading light. "I own this land," Gavino explained, helping her from the helicopter with his usual care. 500 acres. "I come here when I need to remember what peace feels like. When the weight of my world becomes too heavy and I need space to just breathe." They walked along the beach as the sun set. Gavino holding her hand like it was natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. The sand was cool beneath their bare feet. They'd left their shoes in the helicopter, and the ocean breeze carried the salt spray smell of deep water and possibility. "My father brought me to a beach like this once," Gavino said quietly, his voice nearly lost in the sound of waves before he died. "I was maybe 13. He told me that no matter how powerful I became, I should never forget what it felt like to be small, to stand before the ocean and remember that I'm just one person in a vast world. That power is temporary, but the ocean is eternal." "That's beautiful," Emily said, squeezing his hand. "He was a complicated man, violent when he needed to be, ruthless in business, feared by enemies. But he loved me in his way. He loved my mother completely, my sister fiercely." Gavino stopped walking and turned to face the ocean, pulling Emily in front of him and wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I want to love better than he did. I want to love without conditions, without violence, without the need to control everything. I want to love with generosity and trust." Emily leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart against her back. "You already do," she whispered, "with me. You already do." Gavino pressed his face into her hair, breathing deeply. "I'm falling in love with you more every moment. I've been trying to fight it, trying to maintain some distance, some control, but I can't anymore. When I look at you, all my carefully constructed walls just crumble, and I don't care. I don't want them back." Emily turned in his arms to face him, the dying light painting his face in shades of gold and shadow. "I love you too. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other, but it feels like I've known you forever, like I was waiting for you my whole life without realizing it." Gavino planted a soft kiss on her cheek as the sun disappeared and the stars began to emerge. The world fell away until there was only them, only this, only the sound of the ocean and the pounding of their hearts and the certainty that this was right. This was real. This was worth any risk. When they finally detached from each other, Gavino took her hand and led her toward the cottage. "Come inside," he said, his voice rough. "Let me show you the rest." The cottage was simple but beautiful. One large room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Gavino lit the fire while Emily explored, running her hands over the soft blankets on the bed, the books on the shelves, the fresh flowers in a vase on the small dining table. "You planned this," she said, turning to face him as he knelt before the fireplace, flames beginning to catch and flicker. "I hoped," Gavino corrected, standing and crossing to her. "I hoped you might be ready, that you might want this. But if you're not, if this is too much, too fast." Emily crossed the distance between them and hugged him. Then he lifted her and placed her down gently on the soft blankets, like she was something precious that might break if handled roughly. "Are you sure?" he asked, hovering over her. His voice strained with the effort of holding back. "Because once we do this, there's no going back for me. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours forever." "I'm sure," Emily whispered, pulling him down to her. "I've never been more sure of anything. I want this. I want you, all of you." What happened next was tender and perfect in ways Emily had never imagined possible. Gavino was careful as he treated her, like she was the answer to every prayer he'd never spoken aloud. While Emily felt like something in her soul clicked into place, like she'd found a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. Afterward, he held her close and smiled. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls, and the ocean sang its endless song outside. "You're mine now," Gavino said softly, possessiveness and wonder mixing in his voice. "And I'm yours completely forever, no matter what comes." Emily curled into him, feeling complete in a way she'd never experienced before. "I love you. I love you more than I thought possible," Gavino replied, his arms tightening around her. "More than is probably safe. More than is certainly wise." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the ocean singing outside, the fire warming the room, both believing that nothing could touch them here, that they'd found something pure and perfect that the dangerous world couldn't reach. But the next morning, everything changed. Emily woke to find Gavino gone from the bed. The sheets beside her were cold. He'd been gone for a while. She pulled on his shirt, which fell to mid-thigh, and walked outside barefoot, finding him on the beach talking on his phone, his voice hard and cold in a way she'd never heard before. "I don't care what it takes. Find him, and when you do, make sure he understands the consequences of threatening what's mine. Make him understand what happens to people who cross me. He paused, listening. No, not permanently. Not yet. But make him wish it was permanent. Gavino hung up and turned, his expression immediately softening when he saw her standing there, the morning sun backlighting her, making her look almost ethereal. Emily, I didn't want to wake you. What's wrong? She asked, her stomach knotting with sudden fear, with the realization that she'd just stepped fully into his dangerous world. Gavino hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell her, how much to protect her from. Finally, he sighed. Someone took photos of us at the charity event. They're threatening to release them to the media along with information about me that could be damaging. What kind of information? The kind that confirms suspicions people have had about my business dealings for years. The kind that links me to organizations and activities that would interest law enforcement. The kind that could destroy everything I've built. Gavino ran a hand through his hair, agitation clear in every movement. But that's not what concerns me most. Then what does? Being seen with you makes you a target, Gavino said, crossing to her and gripping her shoulders. It tells my enemies that you matter to me, that you're someone they can use to hurt me. And I can't. His voice broke. I can't let anything happen to you. I won't survive it. Emily's chest squeezed with fear, but also with determination. Then what do we do? I handle it. I make the threat disappear. I neutralize anyone who might use you against me. Gavino's eyes were distant, already planning strategies, calculating risks. And you. He closed his eyes, pain etching deep lines in his face. You stay safe, even if that means staying away from me. Emily's heart stopped, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. You're pushing me away. I'm protecting you, Gavino said desperately, his hands tightening on her shoulders, almost painfully. Don't you understand? Everyone who gets close to me becomes a target. My enemies will use you to hurt me. They'll threaten you, kidnap you, hurt you, destroy you just to watch me suffer, just to bring me to my knees. I don't care, Emily said, her voice shaking with emotion. I'm not leaving you because things got difficult. I'm not running at the first sign of danger. This isn't difficult, Emily. This is deadly. Gavino's voice rose, frustration and fear warring in his expression. I've lived this life for 40 years. I know how it works. I know what they'll do to you. I've seen it happen to people who mattered far less to me than you do. Then protect me, Emily shot back. You said that's what you do. You said my safety was your responsibility, so take that responsibility seriously and keep me safe instead of pushing me away. And I'm taking that responsibility seriously by keeping you away from the danger. Gavino pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers, his breathing ragged. Even if it kills me to let you go, even if living without you feels impossible. Emily pushed away from him, anger rising through her fear like lava through rock. So last night meant nothing. Everything you said, everything we did, that was all a lie. Last night meant everything, Gavino said, his voice breaking completely. That's exactly why I have to do this. I love you too much to watch you get hurt because of me. Too much to let my dangerous world destroy you. That's not your choice to make, Emily said, tears streaming down her face now, hot and angry and heartbroken. I'm not a child. I'm not some helpless thing that needs you to make decisions for me. I can decide for myself what risks I'm willing to take. Not this risk, Gavino said firmly, his own tears finally falling. Not with your life. I won't gamble with your safety. I won't take that chance. They stood there facing each other on the beach, both crying now, both torn between love and fear, both wanting opposite things. Him wanting her safe, even if it meant losing her. Her wanting them together, even if it meant danger. Take me home, Emily finally said, her voice hollow, all the fight draining out of her. If you're so determined to push me away, if you're so certain this is the right thing, then do it. Take me home. But don't pretend it's for my own good. You're just afraid. Afraid to fight for us. Afraid to believe we can make this work. Gavino flinched like she'd struck him, like her words had found every vulnerable place and pressed hard. Of course I'm afraid. I'm terrified because losing you would destroy me more completely than any enemy ever could. But staying with me might destroy you, and I'd rather be destroyed alone than watch you suffer for loving me. The helicopter ride back to the city was silent, both of them staring out separate windows, both hearts breaking in different ways, both wondering if love was supposed to hurt this much. The pilot clearly sensed the tension, keeping his eyes forward, saying nothing. When they reached Emily's apartment, Gavino walked her to the door one last time, moving like a man heading to his own execution. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with unshed tears, with grief for what they were losing. "I will love you until the day I die. Remember that. Whatever happens, whatever you think of me after this, remember that I love you more than I've ever loved anything." "Then you were right," Emily said coldly, even as her heart shattered into pieces too small to ever fit back together. "You're not a good man because a good man would fight for the person he loves, not run away when things got hard, not choose fear over love." She went inside and closed the door, sliding down against it, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but feel the crushing weight of loss. Outside, Gavino stood frozen for long minutes, her words cutting deeper than any knife ever had, deeper than any wound he'd received in 40 years of dangerous living. Because she was right. He was choosing fear. He was running. He was doing exactly what he'd always told himself he'd never do, letting fear win over love. But he couldn't see another way. Couldn't see how to keep her safe while keeping her close. So he walked away, each step feeling like dying, leaving pieces of his heart on her doorstep behind him. For 3 days, Emily's phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no flowers, nothing. Gavino was gone from her life, as completely as if he'd never existed, leaving only the memory of what they'd had and the ghost of what they might have been. Emily went to work like a zombie, moving through her days on autopilot. She painted at night with tears streaming down her face, violent slashes of color onto canvas, blacks and grays and deep reds expressing the pain she couldn't voice aloud. Her apartment filled with paintings of heartbreak, each one a scream she couldn't let out in public. Emma tried to help, bringing coffee and pastries, offering to listen, but Emily couldn't talk about it. Couldn't explain that she'd fallen completely in love with a dangerous man in 3 weeks, and he'd broken her heart to keep her safe. It sounded crazy, even in her own head. On the 4th day, Derek showed up at the gallery. Emily looked up from her computer to find him standing in the doorway, looking genuinely apologetic for maybe the first time in his life. He'd lost weight, had circles under his eyes, looked like he'd been sleeping as poorly as she had. "Emily, please," he said, taking a step inside. "Can we talk just for 5 minutes?" "There's nothing to talk about," Emily said flatly, her voice empty of emotion. She had none left to give him. "I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. Maya meant nothing. She means nothing. You're the one I love, the one I want, the one I can't live without." He stepped closer, his expression pleading. "Please give me another chance. Let me prove I can be better. Let me show you I've changed." Emily looked at him. This man she'd thought she loved, who now seemed like a stranger, like someone from a different lifetime. She felt nothing looking at him. No anger, no residual love, just emptiness. "No," she said simply. "Why? Because of that old man you've been seeing." Derek's expression turned ugly, revealing the petty jealousy underneath the apology. "Come on, Emily. He's what, 60, 70? What could he possibly offer you that I can't? He's probably using you. Guys like that always do. Rich older men using young women, and then discarding them when they get bored. He offers me everything you never could," Emily said quietly, her voice gaining strength even as tears threatened. "Respect, protection, real love. He treats me like I'm precious, like I matter, like my happiness is important. You never did any of that. He's using you," Derek spat. All pretense of apology gone now. Guys like that always do. Rich, powerful men don't actually care about the young women they date. They just want arm candy and someone to show off. He'll get bored and move on to the next pretty young thing, and you'll be left with nothing. "Get out," Emily said, her voice shaking with rage that felt good after days of numbness. "Get out, and don't ever come back. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my work. We're done. We've been done since the moment I walked in on you with Maya." Derek opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the paintings on the walls. Emma appeared moments later, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" "No," Emily said honestly. "But I will be eventually." That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying conversations with Gavino, wishing she'd said something different, wishing she'd fought harder to make him see that she wasn't afraid of his world. That love was worth the risk. She kept reaching for her phone to call him, then stopping herself because what was the point? He'd made his decision. He'd chosen to protect her over keeping her, and she had to respect that, even if it was destroying her. At 2 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went to her studio, the small spare bedroom where she painted. She pulled out a fresh canvas, not thinking, just feeling, letting her hands move across the surface in broad strokes of midnight blue and silver and deep purple. Hours passed in a blur. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and slowly an image emerged from the chaos of color. Gavino's face rendered in shadows and light and memory, his eyes holding all the sadness and love she'd seen in them that last morning on the beach. She was still painting, tears streaming down her face when her phone rang. But it wasn't Gavino. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered cautiously, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of paint across her cheek. "Miss Hayes." The voice was unfamiliar, cold, male, with an accent she couldn't place. Vaguely Eastern European, maybe. "You don't know me, but I know you. I know you've been seeing Gavino Dante. I know he cares about you very much. I know he pushed you away to keep you safe." Touching, really. Emily's blood ran cold, her heart stopping in her chest. Who is this? Someone who wants to send Gavino a message. Someone who wants him to understand that he can't just walk away from his obligations. Someone who knows that hurting the people he loves is the only way to hurt him. The man's voice was casual, conversational, which made it even more terrifying. "And you, my dear, are going to deliver that message for me. I don't. You'll hear from me again soon, very soon. And when you do, you'll do exactly what I say. Or Gavino Dante will watch you die slowly, painfully, while he's helpless to stop it." The line went dead. Emily stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear, terror flooding her system like ice water through her veins. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stand there and shake. Gavino had been right. Being with him had made her a target. His world had found her anyway, despite his efforts to push her away. Despite the distance he'd created between them, the danger he'd feared had come for her regardless. But instead of running, instead of hiding, instead of calling the police, who probably couldn't help anyway, Emily felt something else rise in her chest alongside the terror. Determination, anger, the certainty that she wasn't going to let whoever this was use her to hurt Gavino. She wasn't going to be a passive victim. She wasn't going to let fear win. She grabbed her keys with shaking hands and ran for her car. Emily drove to Gavino's estate with her hands shaking on the wheel, adrenaline and fear making her entire body tremble. The gates were closed when she arrived, imposing iron barriers that suddenly looked more like prison walls than protection. She pressed the intercom button repeatedly, urgently until a familiar voice answered. "Miss Hayes, it was Marco, one of Gavino's security team." His voice sounded surprised, concerned, "Mr. Dante isn't expecting. I need to see him now. It's urgent. Someone called me." Her voice broke on the last word, fear finally cracking through her determination. There was a pause. Then the gates swung open with a mechanical hum. Emily drove up the long driveway too fast, her tires kicking up gravel, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Gavino met her at the door before she could even get out of the car, looking like he hadn't slept since she'd seen him last. His eyes were shadowed, his face drawn, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. But the moment he saw her expression, everything changed. His entire body went rigid, alert, dangerous. "Emily, what happened?" He pulled her from the car, his hands running over her arms, her face checking for injuries with frantic efficiency. "Someone called me," she said, her voice shaking. "They said they know about us. They said they want to send you a message through me. They said they'd make you watch me die if I don't do what they say." Gavino's expression went cold and deadly, transforming him into someone Emily had never seen before, the true version of the dangerous man he'd warned her about. When? How long ago? 20 minutes, maybe less. They hung up before I could. Gavino already had his phone out dialing. "Marco, I need a trace on Emily's phone immediately. Someone made contact, threatening contact. I want to know who within the hour." He hung up and turned back to her, his hands gripping her arms. "Did they say anything else? Any details about when or where or how?" "No, just that they'd contact me again soon, that I'd do exactly what they said." Emily was crying now, fear and relief at seeing Gavino mixing into overwhelming emotion. But I'm not telling you this because I'm scared and I want you to save me. I'm telling you because we're in this together. You don't get to push me away to keep me safe. It doesn't work that way. They found me anyway. Gavino closed his eyes, pain and relief warring on his face. When he opened them again, they were blazing with emotion. You should have stayed away. You should have let me handle this from a distance. Coming here puts you in more danger. Stop telling me what I should do, Emily said fiercely, anger cutting through her fear. I love you. That means something. It means I don't run when things get dangerous. It means I stand beside you, and we face it together. I'm done letting you make decisions for me out of fear. You don't understand what you're asking, Gavino said desperately, but his resistance was crumbling. These people, they don't play by rules. They hurt innocent people without remorse. They'll use you to destroy me. Then stop treating me like I'm helpless. Emily shot back. I chose you. I chose this. Now stop pushing me away and let me choose how I face whatever comes next. Gavino stared at her for a long moment, something breaking in his expression. Then suddenly he pulled her close, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his whole body shaking. I can't lose you, he whispered into her hair, his voice raw with emotion. I can't survive it. It would break me completely. When I walked away from you, I thought I was dying. Every moment without you has been torture. Then don't push me away, Emily said, her arms wrapping around him just as tightly. Keep me close. Protect me if you must. But don't make me leave. Don't make me face this alone. Gavino pulled back, framing her face with his hands, his eyes searching hers. If you stay, you follow my rules. No arguments, no independence. You don't go anywhere alone. You tell me where you are at all times. You let my people watch over you constantly. Okay. Emily agreed without hesitation. I mean it, Emily. This isn't negotiable. Your safety comes before everything. Before your work, before your freedom, before my own comfort. Everything. I understand. I agree. Just don't send me away again. Gavino kissed her then, desperate, and claiming and full of relief like a drowning man finally reaching air. When they pulled apart, his eyes were wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. You're the bravest person I've ever met, he said hoarsely, and the most stubborn, and I love you more than I have words to express. I learned from the best, Emily said, managing a small smile despite her fear. Gavino's phone rang. He answered it immediately, his expression hardening as he listened. Find him. I want him brought to me alive. I want to look him in the eyes before I decide what happens next. He hung up and looked at Emily. They traced the call. It came from Andrew, that man from the charity event. Andrew. Emily's eyes widened. But I thought I'd handled him too. Clearly, I underestimated his desperation. Gavino's jaw clenched with barely controlled rage. He's been a problem for years. Always pushing boundaries, always trying to take what's mine. This ends now, permanently. What are you going to do? What I should have done long ago. Remove the threat completely. Gavino's eyes were cold now, showing the ruthless man who'd survived decades in a brutal world. But first, I need to make sure you're protected. Within the hour, Gavino had mobilized his entire organization. Security personnel arrived to sweep Emily's apartment for listening devices or tracking equipment. Her belongings were packed and moved to Gavino's estate. A team was assigned to watch the gallery 24 hours a day, and Emily found herself installed in Gavino's home, not as a guest this time, but as someone under his complete protection. This is temporary, Gavino said, though they both knew it was a lie. Once Andrew is handled, once the immediate threat is neutralized. I don't want temporary, Emily interrupted. I want permanent. I want this. I want you. I want to build a life together, not hide from the world. Gavino's expression softened. Then you'll have it, all of it. For as long as you'll keep me. That night, Emily couldn't sleep despite her exhaustion. Too much adrenaline, too much fear, too much relief at being back with Gavino. She wandered through his house, finally ending up in his library, where she knew she'd find him. He was sitting in one of the leather chairs, staring into space, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. When he saw her, he opened his arms without a word, and Emily climbed into his lap, curling against his chest. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now I end this. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Andrew. He thinks threatening you will make me weak, make me negotiate. Gavino's voice was cold, controlled. He's about to learn exactly how wrong he is. Threatening you doesn't make me weak, it makes me lethal. I want to come with you. Absolutely not. Gavino said firmly, brooking no argument. This is not negotiable. You stay here where you're safe, where my people can protect you. I go alone. This is my world, my fight. You don't need to see this side of me. Emily wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. This was the line he wouldn't cross. Letting her witness violence. Letting her see him do whatever terrible things he was planning. Part of her appreciated the protection of her innocence. Part of her hated being excluded. Promise me you'll come back, she whispered instead. Gavino's expression softened. I promise. I've survived worse than Andrew, and now I have something worth living for. That makes me more dangerous than I've ever been. They fell asleep in the chair together, wrapped in each other's arms, both pretending they weren't terrified of what morning would bring. The next day, Gavino left early. Emily woke to find him gone. But there was a note on the pillow beside her, written in his careful hand. I will always come back to you. Wait for me, trust me, love me. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Emily tried to paint, tried to read, tried to do anything to occupy her mind, but all she could think about was Gavino, facing danger alone, doing whatever terrible things he needed to do to keep them safe. Maria arrived at noon, the older woman who'd worked for Gavino for 20 years, who told Emily stories about him. She made lunch and kept Emily company, clearly assigned to distract and comfort. He'll be fine, Maria said confidently, as if she'd seen this dozens of times before. Mr. Dante always comes home, always. He's too stubborn to let anyone beat him. Late afternoon finally brought the sound of Gavino's car in the driveway. Emily ran to meet him, relief flooding through her when she saw he was unharmed. No visible injuries, no blood, just exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He caught her in his arms, holding her tight. It's handled. Andrew won't be a problem anymore. Neither will anyone else who thinks threatening you is a viable strategy. Emily didn't ask for details. Some things were better left unknown. She just held him, grateful he'd kept his promise to come back. That evening, Gavino cooked dinner while Emily watched, both of them needing the normalcy of domestic routine after the tension of recent days. As he stirred sauce on the stove, he spoke without looking at her. I've been thinking about what happens next, about how we move forward, about what kind of life we can build together. Emily's stomach nodded. What do you mean? I mean that I can't keep living in two worlds. The one where I'm Gavino Dante, feared and powerful, and the one where I'm just a man who wants to love you without complications. He turned to face her. Something has to change. I have to change. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to step back from my old life. Not completely. I have responsibilities, people who depend on me, obligations I can't just abandon. But I want to shift my focus. Build something legitimate, something clean, something I'm not ashamed to share with you. Gavino crossed to her, taking her hands. I've spent 40 years building an empire on fear and power. Maybe it's time to build something better, a life actually worth living. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You'd do that. Give up your power. Change everything. Power means nothing if I can't share my life with you openly, honestly, without fear. Gavino squeezed her hands. You're worth more than any empire, more than any amount of money or influence. You're worth everything. I don't want you to give up who you are for me, Emily protested. I'm not giving up anything, Gavino said firmly. I'm choosing what matters, and you matter more than anything else ever has, more than anything else ever will. They held each other in the kitchen, sauce simmering forgotten on the stove, both understanding that this was a turning point, the moment where everything changed, where fear finally lost to love, where they chose each other completely, despite every logical reason not to. We're going to make this work, Emily said with certainty. We're going to build something beautiful together. Something real and lasting and worth all the pain it took to find each other. Yes, Gavino agreed, his voice thick with emotion. We are, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Inside Gavino's kitchen, two people who should never have worked together held each other and believed in impossible things. In happy endings, in love conquering fear, in building futures from broken pasts together.